I am back doing another bathroom renovation and shower build, specifically, is what I'm usually called for. Sometimes I do a whole bathroom renovation, sometimes I only do the shower, sometimes, yeah, it all is mixed up a little bit. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the process of doing what I normally do, which is talking about all the damages and things they could have done better and how I'm going to put it back together and all that stuff. Instead, what I'm going to do, which I normally never do, is I'm going to actually show the process. I don't like the idea of people watching me work, but it seems to be all the rage to watch people tear things apart. Anyway, this is going to be a little more complicated than what I normally run into. The shower will be a tiled shower, which it's currently not. It's one of these fiberglass enclosures, which are relegated to the size that they are. I think this is a 3 by 3 foot shower, very, very small. And because they are specific sizes, even though they built these walls out another 9-10 inches, they can't get that 9-10 inches the way that a custom shower can go. So I'm going to be bumping this shower out probably all the way up to here. This will end up being the curb. And then I'm going to extend it out. So this used to be a closet and it's still going to remain so, except this is a 36-inch opening, and I'm going to go all the way up to, I think, about 24 inches. I'm going to leave about 12 inches left over, 12 to 14 inches left over, somewhere around that, almost that middle mark, maybe a little bit over there. And so this wall will actually go away. From that point backward, all of this will go away and it will be bumped over to here. And in that process, that shower head and the shower valve, which they're going to keep, will also go into this new wall that I'm going to build. In that same process, this wall will go down to a knee wall, typically about 4 foot, somewhere in that range, 35, 36 inches, maybe 48 inches. I don't know, they really haven't told me yet, but somewhere around stomach level. I don't know why they call them knee wall, because nobody's knee is that low. So when this becomes a knee wall, there will also be a bench over here, and the bench will take up this whole area and come out to the curb. And then this will be one long, almost 6 foot shower by a good 3.5 foot deep. So it'll be a nice shower when it's done. And this is day one. This is the tear out phase. And I'm going to try and consolidate, and I'm going to fast forward. Sometimes they call it time lapse. I'm going to try and do that the best I can. Put some music in the background that hopefully you like, but probably you won't. And I'm just going to get started on it. Well, obviously I'm not doing music, I'm doing a voiceover. I thought that would be more appropriate. So here I am, I'm taking out all the shower rails of the door. Well, I took out the door already, now all the rails are coming out. And basically just getting it ready so that I can start doing proper tear out, which begins basically after this escutcheon plate and handle are taken off. Then I can start getting all of this sheetrock and 2x4s off, which I'm doing there. Taking off all the corner bead, all the sheetrock. I'm actually going to cut these 2x4s right in center point, because it's a lot easier to pull off those 2x4s in sections from the top and the bottom than it is trying to get out the entire length. And then I'm just knocking out all the rest of the stuff to there I am with the Sawzall. Getting all those boards out of there is key, and I want to make sure that I keep, because that's where the shower valve is, that I want to keep everything kind of open, so I make sure I'm not cutting any pipes or anything. Of course, I have the water off. And there I'm taking out all the sheetrock and everything, because remember, I'm shortening that closet by about half. So it's a 30, I think it's a 35-inch opening, and it will eventually be a 24-inch opening. But on the inside, it's going back 2 feet, which will get more length out of that shower from left to right. And now I'm just taking out the last 2x4s, and eventually I'll get to this knee wall, which I'm doing now, and I'm cutting right at about bottom of the window level. And speaking of level, there's my level. So I'm getting that out so I can get in a Sawzall and do the same thing. I'm taking out the corner bead and the sheetrock,
and then I'll get the Sawzall and I'll cut those 2x4s into half because it's much easier. In fact, I think I'm doing that up there. I think I'm making that happen so that I can get in and cut that wall down and get the fiberglass. There I am. So the Dremel is facilitating taking out all that sheetrock, and then I'm able to go ahead and cut those 2x4s off. There I am cutting the 2x4s. So now that that's off, I can kind of one fell swoop take off that entire sheetrock, get the 2x4s out of there, and start cutting into the fiberglass behind it. And by the way, be careful cutting in that fiberglass around where the valve is at. You don't want to hit a pipe. Very important to know. Also, I'm taking out in sections. If you notice, that first top section came out, and then I'm going to cut down the corner there and cut those in sections. Much easier to take them out in sections like that than it is the whole kit and caboodle. Except for this back part. This back part's going to come down in one fell swoop once I cut the bottom off. Then I'm going to get to the pan proper. I'm going to square that out because it's easier to get one of those big fiberglass pans out by cutting a square around the drain. Pull that out of there, and then I can cut the drain off with a Sawzall. There it goes. And now I'm getting the shower drain proper and the supply lines ready to refashion. But before that happens, I need to know my parameter. So shortly here, I'm going to be putting my curb in. There it is. And the curb goes first so that I can do a proper measurement on where all my pipes go. Now I'm cutting out for my stack, and the stack is going to get moved over. The back wall is already built to the right there. I already fashioned that out prior to me coming on video. Sorry about that. Cutting the hole for the stack, repositioning the P-trap area, getting that all glued in and fashioned correctly, and then I'm going to cut out the supply line. Now that whole tree of the supply line, the hot and the cold, I'm keeping intact. I'm only cutting off the bottom 90 area because that's going to go in the holes that I'm going to drill into the new wall. There it is. So that already got soldered in later on, and now I'm just covering everything up with new plywood, and now I'm cutting the hole for eventually my drain cap to go on. It's usually about a 5.5 inch hole, and the best way to do it is drill some holes in there first, pre-drill, come in there with a Sawzall, and because I know my bottom flange has a taper, I tapered the wood to match up to the taper of the flange, and there it is. Flange goes in there, set with some screws, and now I jump over to the niche where I cut out that middle stud about 17 inches, and then I put in the top and bottom plates. That'll reduce it from 17 down to about 14. And by the time everything's said and done, it'll be about 12 inches by the time the sheetrock and tile and everything is inside of that niche. It'll be right at 12 inches if you use a 17 mark as a marker. And then I'm just kind of refashioning all the insulation that I had taken out earlier, putting that back in those slots. And this is kind of the build back process. Here's the bench 2x6, which I've done many times. I have a video on that if you look on my channel on how to build a bench. I build them basically the same way. It's just the length that matters. And then I cut a section out of the curb because that bench is going to slide right in there. And the bench and the curb are going to be flush with each other, so that all my tile runs contiguous along the outside edge of that, as well as the knee wall. Now I'm just toe nailing in to that knee wall studs, and I've got one to the right over there. If you look, there's a 2x6, and I'm nailing in my scab pieces, and there's a piece of plywood right there where the pipes are at, because the pipes extend too far, so the plywood is a nice little trick to still have some backing there. Now I'm putting my pan liner, doing a pre-fit. Now I know it's going to work. I put my caulking down on the top flange of the drain, and now I'm cutting out for my bolts. My bolts are going to go in there, and then I cut the little X there for the top locking flange, and that gets bolted down. And now I'm ready to put up all the flaps of my pan liner, as well as that drain. That drain barrel gets screwed down to about the size that I think I'm going to need for my mortar bed, but that's adjustable up to the point you start pouring your pan. And then I'm just fashioning out my pan liner. I have much more than I need, but there's no such thing as too much. 3 inches above the curb is a minimum of what you want. All the excess can be cut out later if you choose to do so. I only cut out the outside of the curb. Do my hospital folds in the corner, cut a little slot there so it flaps over the curb. And then when I put these fasteners down at the bottom, I just cut off a little excess pan liner that's left over, throw it away, and there you go. Pan is ready to pour. Now, this section of the video is rather long because I did one entire video based on this alone, and that's on my channel as well. So I hyphenated it for the purposes of this, but I just go through the process probably a little too long. But there's much more information on that other video if you choose to watch it. And so I'm just doing a dry pack right here with mortar mix, which is basically 4 to 1, 5 to 1 sometimes, sand to cement. And I just use a screed board to kind of move things around. In that video, you'll hear me talking more about what I'm doing. I don't even put a level on it until I move all my mortar around. And then once I get it eyeballed, which is I'm usually pretty right on point, then I start putting levels on it. But at this point, I haven't done that yet. A lot of people prefer to do probably about 3-4 inches of dry pack on the outside parameter of the whole thing, and then kind of work off of that down to the drain to get their slope. But I've tried that many times, and it's not as efficient as doing this, believe it or not, for me anyway. And there's my level for the first time. So now is the point where I'm starting to get things leveled out properly and sloped down. 1/4 inch per foot is the minimum standard, but don't go by that like it's the Bible. If you get a little bit more pitch than that, then no harm, no foul. But the parameter is kind of important because eventually your tile is going to go on top of that mortar bed, and your wallboard is going to set almost to the bottom of that. I leave a gap there because I don't want water wicking up my wallboard. Speaking of wallboard, we're going to get to that here momentarily. I use wallboard Durarock specifically on my curb and my bench, but I don't use it on the walls because the entire thing is going to get red guarded anyway, so the whole thing will be waterproof, which is why I don't mind using green board. Waterproofing your walls I don't believe is necessary anyway, because it's a vertical surface where water doesn't penetrate. But on those horizontal surfaces like the bench and the curb, I feel it's important. Well, I don't think it's important. I think it's almost necessary to use a cement backer board. And now I have my pitch. Put my torpedo level on top of the drain cap. Make sure everything is bubbled out in the middle. Bubbled out. I just made that up. And there's my wallboard. And so I'm mixing up some thin set because you're going to see me hit all these fastener holes as well as all the planes, change of planes, and where the wallboard meets another wallboard. I'm putting thin set on there as well as on top of my shower pan proper. I found over the years that Red Guard sticks to thin set a whole lot better than it does the mortar. Not that it doesn't the mortar, but it's just that it sticks a lot better to the thin set. And so that's why I screed out my thin set along that parameter and around the drain, as you see there. After that's dry, I'll put some caulking around that drain as well. And then, of course, on top of the curb, I butter my curb, so that's all contiguous. That all the wallboard, where it meets the wallboard, is all one nice, flat, pretty surface. Because the Red Guard will be next. And that's basically the prep part. All of this pan part matters more than anything else in your shower because this is where all the failures happen. And then I jump over to my wallboard, which you already saw up on the wall earlier, but I'm just showing setting the wallboard and cutting out for the niche. And I come in there with a Dremel and I cut out that rectangular area where my niche is going to be, and I basically put caulking on the back of the board, glue them together, and then I fasten the rest of my inside and left and right and top and bottom with wallboard. But I also do the same prep that I did for the curb, making sure that I take a razor knife and a blade and I cut off all my excess wallboard that I have and make it nice and flat and pretty. Because again, the Red Guard is coming next, and I want to make sure that there's no boogering going on. And that's why I skipped the Red Guard, because it's very boring. And there it is. And so right here, I'm just screeding out all my thin set, very, very thin layer of thin set. You're not trying to collapse those ridges with regard to small areas like this, or how would I put it, um, mosaics. You're not trying to collapse ridges. What you're trying to do is get one proper layer of thin set, that you don't have a little bit less or a little bit more thin set going on, and that's why you use a trowel, regardless that you're not trying to collapse those ridges. Anyway, getting back to the niche, all the little tiny pieces of a mosaic have to be fashioned in there, including those little tiny black dots, which have to go in as well, and that's why it's so tedious. And that's what I'm doing there, setting them in there and letting that dry. And then I'm going to jump over to the shower valve because they wanted a vertical border rather than a horizontal border. So this same mosaic that you see here, I'm going to do around the shower valve to have what I call kind of a waterfall effect, which I do from time to time. But again, it's very, very tedious. You'll see that in a few minutes. I just dry fitted my shower pan tile. As you saw, I just pulled them out. I had marked them from right to left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many pieces I have, I mark them after I dry fit them, so I know that each one goes back exactly where I had dry fit, and that's what I'm doing. There's 1, and there's 2, and here's 3 coming. And so I do that across the board. Once you dry fit and you know all those pieces are going to fit, then it's just a matter of screeding out your thin set again. And you're doing it with the trowel, same as I did on the niche, but you're only doing that for the purposes of getting all your thin set the same size. You don't want, like I said, too much thin set or too little thin set for those mosaic. And then you're pushing them down with a float, a rubber float. You're going to see me tap all that down with a rubber float, pushing it down into the thin set. But you don't want a bunch of thin set because, trust me, spending an hour, hour and a half trying to clean out all those grout lines because you use too much thin set is not a fun thing to do. Anyway, so you're going to see there are voids around that drain, specifically because each one of those pieces have to be cut individually circular, and the only way you can make that happen is going to be with a wet saw. You're not going to make that happen any other way, not with nippers, not with a grinder, not with anything. I've seen people try and grind those tile around there, and it looks like a grinder has done that. And so, yeah, use a wet saw. It's a little artsy to try and get all those circular pieces cut exactly, and the better they look, I mean, honestly, you're going to be looking at that drain quite a bit, and so the better they look, not that they're practical necessarily, but the better they look, the better it is. I also cut my tile with a small taper. My tile never sets flush with the drain cap. So I don't know that I'm the only one that does it. I've just never seen it done. I started doing that probably from day one. I just feel it's better to have about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch of rise on my tile above my drain cap, and then do a little tapering of those tile, just kind of so that there's positive water flow going into my drain, I guess is the bottom line. So here I'm kind of fashioning my circular cuts with a pencil, kind of showing the process of doing the cutting. Where I'm cutting the circular takes a while. For probably 6 pieces, it might take me up to 30 minutes because I want to get them as perfect as possible. See that? And then I come back and I do a little taper cut on the top of them so that, again, I have positive water flow. See that? So all those tiles are going to set slightly higher than the drain cap. And you don't have to do that. It's just something I've gotten used to over the years, and I feel better about it. One of the reasons I don't like square drains, it's very hard to do the taper cuts around, a double corner on a square drain. Much, much easier to do it on a circular drain. And here I'm cleaning out the grout lines. Very, very important. You don't want that stuff to dry. So clean it out when it's wet. It'll make your life easier. And that's all I'm doing there. I think I'm going to jump over after that to the mosaic around the valve. Nope, my bad. I'm going to grout. Oh, so something to know. This is, I believe this is a marble hexagon tile, as is the mosaic you saw on the backsplash, and as is the mosaic you're going to see around the valve. Very, very important with marble and water. They don't mix very well. So I highly suggest that when you set these, before you set these, that you actually seal them. And seal them a couple of times prior to ever setting them in the pan. Then, when you get to the grout process, and try and use a really good grout like Prism or even Mapai, use a good grout on your floor. Your floor is your Achilles heel, so pay close attention to that. And then after that's dry, seal it again, when the person leaves, or I don't know if you're doing it yourself. Make sure you seal it a couple times. Also, this is going to be sealed too. This is definitely another place. This is marble as well. This is another place you want to adhere to, any mosaic area. So the ceiling, remember the floor, and any mosaic that you have, if it's going to be at a water level, which this one will be definitely. And you see here I'm doing the same thing, fashioning little tiny pieces. Very, very time consuming, but necessary. And so I just draw a line on left and right to know where my parameter's at, and I just set those pieces in there after the fact and around the valve, and yeah. But I got lucky on this job. They chose a pencil tile to encapsulate this mosaic, which is wonderful for the tiler because, as you see, I'm putting the pencil up now. This pencil is rather thick, and so it doesn't matter that my mosaic is thinner now than my field tile, because my field tile will go right up against that pencil. And here I am taking off my ledger boards at the bottom. I love doing the ledger board thing. And then I'm taking off my leveling clips. And I didn't show any of the tiling because I'm going to show that, I think, on the last 3 rows going up. And then I'm showing it here as well. And I'm tiling my bench. And if you notice, that top cap of the bench and that left side of the bench are bullnose. And right at that corner, the transition, there is a miter cut. So it's a nice transition there. And then those top 2 pieces on the bench are bullnosed at the front, and that left one is bullnosed twice on that left side and the front. And so the tile is going to run right up to that, both on the back of the bench where I'm setting tile now. It's going to run right up to that bullnose, and then that bottom row on the front of the bench is also running up to the bullnose edge. So it's a nice, neat look that you will appreciate at the end of the video a lot. And then we get to the first tile last, and that's where the ledger board had come off. I want to give a shout out to TileMaster GA because I saw a video probably 7 years ago or so, and ever since then I've done the ledger board trick. Doing the last tile first is much easier because now I just do a little back measuring of where my tile is going to fit perfectly in there. I cut that off, and every single one of those tile at the bottom fit like a glove. And so, yeah, I appreciate that little trick that I've incorporated into my tiling process, and highly suggested that you do it as well. If this is a 12-inch tile, I set my ledger board at about 11.5, maybe 11 3/4 at the lowest point of the shower. That's where the ledger board, that's where you start running your tile off of your ledger board. And then when that's dry, you can pull it off the next day and do your bottom row. But you're going to do your floor tile and your grouting first before you do that last row of tile. Speaking of tile, here's the last 3 rows of the top. So you get to watch me tile here. And unlike that mosaic that I was telling you about earlier, this is important that you collapse ridges. So I'm spreading out my thin set with my trowel, my notch trowel. Then I'm back buttering my tile, setting that in there, pushing it down really good so there's good adhesion, there's good coverage. You want about 70, 80, 90, 100% ideally of coverage of that thin set from your tile to your wall. And in order to do that, you have to back butter your tile, spread out your thin set, and then you're trying to collapse those ridges to, push them down in there and get good coverage of your thin set. Unlike the mosaic, which I said earlier, the only purpose for using the trowel and not some type of blade or knife or something like that is because you want good solid coverage on the surface of what you're putting the mosaic on rather than what I'm doing here. There's probably a good part of a 1/4 inch gap by the time it gets down to the left side over there, but that gap is going to be filled in later with a transition strip. Sometimes they call it a profile, and we're going to get to that after I set this last tile. So the profile is going to go around the niche, and the profile is going to go on that right side. You see where the red guard's at. And I intentionally, on that right side, if you see that gap there, that's intentional. The last inch or 1.5 inches or so, that tile never gets thin set. So that gap's going to get filled in here shortly with some thin set. We're doing the niche first. Sorry, my bad. So here is my my trim. Those pieces go in afterward. Yes, but they're pre-cut already, and I'm going to show the process real quickly. You're going to do a 45 cut on your chop saw. Then you're going to get your nippers, and you're going to cut off that excess because you'll never get it in there if you have a straight edge. It must be also tapered. And then you get a little file, and you file off the little burrs and stuff like that. But be very careful not to scratch the surface of that. And then you just do a dry run, put all those in there like you saw earlier, make sure they all fit nicely, and you're ready to start buttering the inside of your niche. So the profile Schluter strips, whatever you want to call them, edging, they're going to be set with this thin set. You're not trying to screw them in or nail them in. Like literally, you're going to set those into this thin set that you're putting on right now, and then you're going to put your inside pieces in there, and then you're going to readjust where you need to with those pieces to make them flush with the wall. And you're going to see that here momentarily. Then you're going to still back butter your pieces that go on the inside, top, and bottom of your niche. And I think we're going to get to that shortly. I don't know why I'm showing so much of this stuff. And then some of the stuff that I kind of glaze over. So that's how it's fashioned in there. You just push it into the thin set, and those holes in those pieces are there for that reason. So they kind of grab onto that thin set. And then, of course, when you set your tile in there, you're back buttering your tile, and that's going to add some extra thin set as well. And then everything's going to go flush, and that's what I'm doing. Little final touches on that. Getting them nice and flush with the tile. Getting all the corners to match up the best I can, so it looks nice and pretty when it's done. Get off all your excess thin set. Very, very important. Easier to clean along the way than it is later on when all that stuff is set up and hard. Much more difficult. And that's how that's set. And as I said before, now comes the time where I'm filling in that gap. That inch or so gap that I left on the field tile now gets filled in with thin set. I push it in there really well with that 6-inch blade. And once I have enough in there that I can't put any more, that's when I just slide that transition piece right inside. And it works like a glove every time. I think the manufacturer calls for setting that piece first, somehow or another, gluing it to the wall, and then running your tile up to it. And I don't do it that way. This is the easiest way I've found out to make that happen. Yeah, clean off all that stuff afterward too. Then, if that profile doesn't fit exactly flush with your tile, the next little trick is to get some shims, which I always keep extra of. And you can use anything, but shims are much easier. And you're going to shove those shims right inside of that gap, the way I'm showing now, to get that profile flush up against your tile the best you can. And you're going to let those shims stay in there and dry overnight. And then when you pull those out, that little gap that's left over where the shims are is going to get a little sheetrock mud to match up to the other sheetrock that's on the wall. I don't know why I'm showing grouting. Grouting is the most boring process of our job, trust me on that. But it is very exciting too, because it means the job is almost over. And so, as I said, prism grout by default is what I use. It's easy to work with. You can use it for large grout lines, small grout lines. You know, you can use it on natural stone, regular stone. It has silica in it instead of sand, so it doesn't scratch anything. And that's why I like it so much. Yeah, we're getting ready to get done here. Shortly, you're going to see the final product. So remember what it was. It was a fiberglass shower. See on that right side, we got a 24-inch opening now. So they have a much smaller linen closet, but they have a much bigger shower. That shower would have been probably pushing 6 foot long had it not been for the bench. But look at that. Finished product in 30 minutes. Yeah, there's the top of the curb that I like, the contiguous curb top. There's my little taper cuts. There's a bench looking pretty with all the bull nose and everything going on. And this took about 8 days, I believe. I think it was 8 days, maybe pushing 9 to make that happen, but much, much better product than what they had before. So I hope you appreciate the video.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're going to call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.